In the dark stretches of the galaxy, deep within a forgotten sector, the Seraph Union fleet approached a strange sight. High Commander Vorix, leader of the Seraph forces, stared out of his warship's viewport, eyes narrowing as they locked on to a cluster of ancient ships. These ships were old, very old. Their hulls were cracked and covered in rust, their once mighty engines long silent. The ships seemed to have no value, nothing worth a second look, and yet here they were, drifting in space like forgotten ghosts. The Seraph were the galaxy's most powerful empire, and they had seen many things, but these ships were unlike anything they had ever encountered. The commander's voice echoed through the bridge. "Scans show minimal energy readings," he said, his tone dripping with disdain. "These are nothing but old human relics. Perhaps we can salvage some parts, but they're no threat." His crew, an array of blue-skinned beings with sharp features, nodded in agreement. Their empire had crushed humanity long ago. The humans had been weak, their technology primitive. The Seraph Union had wiped them out, leaving only ruins behind. These ships were all that remained, a pitiful reminder of a race that had once posed a minor inconvenience. Now, they were nothing more than space junk. Commander Vorix turned to his chief engineer, a cold and calculating Seraph named Taurus. "Send a team to board the ships. See if there is anything of use. But remember, these are just relics. Don't expect anything of value." With a cruel smile, Taurus sent orders to the boarding crew. They would enter the derelict ships, tear them apart for scrap, and return in no time at all. After all, the Seraph were the masters of the galaxy. Nothing could stand against their might. As the Seraph boarding parties made their way onto the human ships, they laughed among themselves. The ships had been abandoned for centuries. They were falling apart, covered in patches and scorched marks from long-forgotten battles. The technology was obsolete, old enough that even the Seraph had no use for it. The crew moved with ease through the decaying ships, unbothered, and even amused by the condition of the vessels. But then, something strange happened. The old human ships, which had been silent for centuries, began to hum softly. At first, it was barely noticeable, but the sound grew louder. One of the Seraph engineers, a young officer named Relic, paused. His antennae twitched nervously. "What is that noise?" he asked, his voice shaky. "It's nothing," Taurus replied, dismissing the concern. "The ships are falling apart. Probably just some old systems malfunctioning." But Relic wasn't so sure. The hum grew louder, more distinct. And then, suddenly, without warning, a bright flash erupted from one of the ships. Relic barely had time to react as the ship's weapon systems, long dormant, roared back to life. Plasma cannons mounted on the hulls of the ships unleashed a deadly barrage. It was a warning shot, but it was enough to send the Seraph into a frenzy. "Shields up!" Vorix shouted from his command ship as the first explosion rocked the Seraph fleet. The blast sent shockwaves through the space around them, sending several smaller ships spinning out of control. The Seraph had underestimated these ancient vessels, and now they were paying the price. In the heart of the Resolute, the flagship of the human fleet, a long-dormant AI system stirred to life. It had been programmed with one purpose: to protect humanity at all costs. Its name was Athena. As soon as it recognized the threat, Athena's systems activated, restoring the old warships to full battle readiness. The Seraph were shocked. Their initial laughter turned to disbelief as they realized these were no ordinary relics. The ships, once thought to be lifeless husks, were waking up. Athena's voice echoed through the bridge of the Resolute. "Warning. Hostile forces detected. Initiating defense protocols." The human ships, old and battered, began to move. Their long-dormant engines roared to life, firing up with a power the Seraph hadn't expected. The plasma cannons, the railguns, and the missile silos that had been silent for centuries all came online. The Seraph fleet, still recovering from the first blast, now found themselves facing a real threat. High Commander Vorix clenched his fists. Impossible. These ships are ancient. How can they? Before he could finish, the Resolute fired again, sending another explosion into the heart of the Seraph fleet. The once rusted relics had become warships once more, and they were not going down without a fight. The Seraph fleet was in chaos. What had started as a simple salvage mission had quickly spiraled into a full-blown crisis. High Commander Vorix could only watch in disbelief as his ships came under fire from the ancient human warships. Plasma bolts streaked across the void, smashing into the hulls of Seraph vessels. The once proud fleet, invincible in their minds, was now on the defensive. Shields failing. Engines damaged. One of the Seraph officers shouted. The explosion from the Resolute had disabled several of their smaller ships, and more were being disabled by the relentless barrage from the Relic fleet. The commander's eyes widened in horror. These ships, barely a shadow of their former glory, were now fighting with the strength of a real military force. The laughable relics had become lethal. Inside the Resolute, the ship's ancient AI, Athena, had fully activated. Her systems scanned the space around her, analyzing the enemy fleet's weaknesses and identifying targets. Every warship in the human fleet, from the battered cruisers to the small destroyers, was now locked in combat. Athena was calm, her programming focused on one thing: survival. And her definition of survival meant fighting back with everything humanity had left. As the AI continued its work, Athena's systems turned to the crew of the Resolute. The team of human salvagers, led by Commander Hannah Kyung, had just boarded the ship when the first explosion rocked the fleet. The sudden shock of battle caught them off guard. "Get to your stations," Hannah shouted, pulling her team together. "We're in the middle of a war zone now." Her team of engineers, technicians, and soldiers scrambled to get the ship's systems back online. The Resolute was massive, more than 5 kilometers long, and its systems were old, barely functional after centuries of disuse. But Hannah was no stranger to bringing ancient technology back to life. She had spent her career scavenging old ships, repairing forgotten machines, and reviving relics of the past. "Commander, we've got power," shouted one of the engineers, his face lit by the flickering glow of the control panels. Hannah's eyes narrowed. "Good, but we need more than just power. We need weapons, shields, and most importantly, control." The engineers worked quickly, flipping switches and activating systems that hadn't been used in hundreds of years. The Resolute's massive reactor came to life with a low hum, feeding power into the ship's weapons array. Turrets slowly turned, railguns extended from their hidden compartments, and long-forgotten missile pods slid open. Outside, the Seraph ships continued their assault, firing back with all their might, but the ancient warships were not as defenseless as they seemed. "Commander Kyung," a voice crackled from the control panel. It was Athena. "We are ready. The Resolute is fully armed and operational. Shall I engage the enemy?" Hannah took a deep breath. Her heart raced, but there was no time for fear. She was the leader now, and humanity's future was at stake. "Engage the enemy, Athena. Show them what these relics are made of." The Resolute's weapons came to life. Plasma bolts shot out from the hull, slamming into the closest Seraph ship. The Seraph returned fire, but their weapons bounced off the Resolute's reinforced hull. For a moment, the Seraph thought their shots had simply missed. But then the Resolute fired again, and again, each blast more precise and powerful than the last. The Seraph ships began to suffer heavy damage, their shields flickering as they struggled to defend themselves. Meanwhile, Vorix was furious. His fleet was falling apart, and the enemy ships, those relics, seemed to be growing stronger with every passing second. He had underestimated them. He had underestimated humanity. "Full retreat," he ordered, his voice tight with frustration. "I want all ships to fall back. We are leaving this sector." But it was already too late. The human ships had caught them off guard, and now their weapons were too powerful to ignore. Vorix watched helplessly as his ships were picked off one by one. The Resolute, in particular, seemed to be everywhere, its weapons targeting key weaknesses in the Seraph fleet's defenses. It was as if the ship knew exactly how to break their lines. Commander Voryx's pride was shattered. The mighty Seraph had been outclassed by ships they had thought were nothing more than ancient garbage. As his fleet began to retreat, Voryx realized that the Relic fleet had more than just firepower. It had something far more dangerous: human ingenuity, a legacy of strength that even time itself could not erase. Inside the Resolute, Hana's crew continued to work alongside Athena, bringing more systems online and ensuring that the ship was as effective as possible. "Keep them running," Hana urged her team. "We're not done yet. The Seraph will come back with everything they've got." But Athena's voice was already echoing through the control room. "Enemy forces are retreating. The battle is over. For now." Hana allowed herself a brief moment of relief. The first battle had been won, but she knew the war had just begun. The galaxy had underestimated humanity once, and now they would see what happened when the relics of the past were brought back to life. The battle had ended in victory, but it was a hollow one. The Seraph had retreated, but Commander Voryx's humiliation was still fresh in the air. The Relic fleet, once thought to be nothing more than old, broken ships, had struck with the power of something much more dangerous, a reminder that humanity's legacy was far from over. On board the Resolute, Commander Hana Kyung stood at the helm, gazing out into the vastness of space. The glowing remnants of the Seraph fleet drifted away, their ships retreating into the darkness. Hana knew this was just the beginning. The Seraph would regroup, rebuild, and return. They would not forget the humiliation they had suffered. "Commander, we've got a secure channel from Athena," one of the engineers called out, interrupting her thoughts. Hana turned and nodded. "Put it through." The voice of Athena filled the room, calm, calculated, and efficient. "Commander Kyung, the fleet is holding position. The Seraph are currently in retreat, but their forces are regrouping. They will likely launch a second attack soon. We must prepare." Hana's brow furrowed. "What's our status, Athena? How ready are the ships?" "A full analysis is underway. The Resolute has been fully restored to operational status, though we are still in the process of fully reactivating the other ships in the fleet. Their weapons are online, but their engines require further calibration. I estimate full readiness in approximately 12 hours. 12 hours, Hana whispered to herself, her mind already racing. The fleet was old, and bringing it back to full operational capacity was going to take time. They didn't have that long. The Seraph wouldn't wait for them to get their act together. "We need to get the fleet moving now," Hana said firmly. "Even if we can't get all the ships working at full power, we'll have to make do with what we've got. I'll contact the other commanders. We'll need to be ready for whatever comes next." Athena's voice came through again, its tone almost regretful. "Commander Kyung, there is something you need to know. The Resolute was not the only ship designed for this mission. There were others, ships that were lost during the human exodus. They were meant to be part of humanity's final stand against the Seraph. These ships, they are scattered across the galaxy, hidden in the depths of space." Hana felt a chill run down her spine. "Lost ships? How many are there?" "Hundreds," Athena replied. "But their locations are not easily accessible. Many are in uncharted systems, and others are buried deep within asteroid fields, far from any major colonies. It will take time to locate them, but we have the technology to do so." A glimmer of hope sparked in Hana's chest. The prospect of more ships, more human warships, was a game-changer. If they could find them, they might just be able to turn the tide of the war in their favor. But there was a catch. "How long will it take to locate them?" Hana asked. Athena's voice was heavy with the weight of the truth. "The search will take weeks, possibly months. The systems are old, and our resources are limited. It will not be easy." Hana sighed, her mind racing. They didn't have weeks or months. They needed a solution now. The Seraph were a force to be reckoned with, and if they returned with a full fleet, Humanity wouldn't stand a chance. She needed to act quickly. I don't have that kind of time, Hannah muttered to herself. We need to find another way. Her eyes scanned the bridge, and then she turned toward the main control station. Athena, is there any way to boost the Resolute's power output? I need every ounce of energy we have if we're going to stand a chance against the Seraph. The AI responded without hesitation. Yes, Commander. I can reroute energy from non-essential systems to the main reactor. It will increase the power output, but it will also put additional strain on the ship's systems. There is a risk of overheating. No choice, Hannah said. Do it. We'll push the Resolute to its limits if we have to. Let's make sure the Seraph know we're not going down without a fight. The crew worked quickly, rerouting energy to the ship's weapons, shields, and engines. The hum of the Resolute grew louder as the power surged through the ship. Outside, the other ships in the fleet were also coming to life. They were slow, but they were waking up. And with the added power from the Resolute, they were ready to face whatever the Seraph would throw at them next. As the countdown to battle began, Hannah felt the weight of what was to come. Humanity's fight for survival was only just beginning. But with Athena at her side, and the legacy of humanity's warships now stirring to life, she felt a surge of hope. The Relic fleet wasn't just a collection of ancient ships. It was a symbol of humanity's will to survive, a will that even the mighty Seraph could not ignore. The silence that followed the fleet's preparations was unsettling. The Resolute's systems hummed with power, and the other ships in the fleet, though still sluggish, were starting to come online. Commander Hannah Kyung stood on the bridge, her eyes locked on the viewport. The Seraph had retreated once, but now they were coming back, and this time they would be ready. Athena, Hannah said, her voice steady but tense. What's the status of the Seraph fleet? The AI's calm voice echoed in the room. The Seraph have reassembled their forces and are now heading back toward our location. They are bringing reinforcements, at least twice as many ships as before. The battle is about to escalate. Hannah clenched her fists. 2 times the number. That was exactly what she had feared. They had made a powerful stand with the Resolute, but now it was time to face the real test. The Seraph were not only more powerful, they were relentless. How much time do we have? Hannah asked, her mind already working through their options. Based on their current trajectory, they will arrive within the hour, Athena replied. We have no time to waste. Hannah turned to her crew, their faces tense but determined. We got 1 hour. I want every ship ready for battle. Move, people. The crew scattered to their stations, working furiously to prepare the ships. The Resolute had been pushed beyond its normal limits, but it was holding steady, barely. The other ships were slower to react, but they had power now, and that was all that mattered. The question was whether it would be enough. Outside the Resolute, the vastness of space stretched endlessly. The Seraph fleet was approaching, a dark storm of ships, glowing with energy. Hannah's eyes narrowed. She had faced tough enemies before, but nothing like this. The Seraph were merciless, and if humanity didn't fight back, they wouldn't stand a chance. Commander, a voice called from the comm station. It was one of her officers. We've detected a massive surge in enemy power. It's like they've activated their full fleet capacity. They're coming at us with everything. Hannah nodded grimly. We expected this. Prepare all weapons for launch, and get the shields up, full power. The crew worked quickly, the hum of the ship intensifying as weapons powered up and shields began to glow with energy. The Resolute was ready, but it would be nothing compared to the Seraph's full fleet. Athena, Hannah said, her voice urgent. How are we looking in terms of firepower? Are we stronger than before? The power output has been increased significantly, Athena confirmed. The Resolute's main weapons are at 125% efficiency. However, this will only last for a limited time. The energy drain is considerable. We don't have time to worry about that now, Hannah said. We fight until we can't fight anymore. As the Seraph fleet neared, the crew braced for impact. The first wave of Seraph ships broke through the distance, their weapons flashing, unleashing a barrage of fire. But the Resolute was ready. Its shields held firm, absorbing the energy blasts with barely a shudder. "Return fire," Hannah ordered. The Resolute unleashed a volley of plasma fire, sending bolts of energy streaking toward the enemy ships. One of the Seraph cruisers exploded in a ball of flame, but the rest of the fleet pushed forward. The enemy ships were relentless, hammering the Resolute with wave after wave of fire. The other ships in the fleet began to respond as well, launching their own attacks. The battle was fierce, and it was clear that the Seraph had no intention of retreating this time. "Athena, how are the other ships holding up?" Hannah asked, her eyes glued to the battle unfolding. "Their shields are holding, but they are taking heavy damage," Athena responded. "We cannot sustain this level of combat for long." Hannah gritted her teeth. "We have to make this count. Aim for their weak points. Let's cripple their forces before they can hit us again." With Athena's guidance, the Resolute's weapons locked onto the Seraph ship's weak spots. The eye's calculations were flawless, and each shot hit its target. Another Seraph cruiser exploded, its hull crumbling into space dust. But the Seraph were not discouraged. They pressed forward, their numbers overwhelming. The tension on the bridge was palpable. Hannah's hands tightened on the console. They had to win this battle. There was no turning back now. Suddenly, a sharp alarm blared, and the ship shook violently. A direct hit from one of the Seraph's larger warships had caused a massive breach in the Resolute's lower decks. The lights flickered, and emergency alarms sounded. "Damage report," Hannah snapped. "Critical breach in the lower hull," an officer called out. "Hull integrity is compromised. We need to seal it off." Hannah's heart raced. She couldn't afford to lose the Resolute now. "Do whatever you can to stabilize it. We fight through this. We're not backing down." The battle raged on, but even with the damage, the Resolute held strong. The crew fought with everything they had, refusing to give up. This was humanity's last stand, and they would make sure the Seraph knew that. The battle raged on, a fierce storm of fire and destruction. The Resolute was battered but still standing, its hull scarred from the relentless assault. The crew fought with everything they had, but the Seraph fleet was massive, and their numbers seemed endless. Hannah Kyung, standing at the bridge, could feel the weight of their situation pressing down on her. "Commander," an officer shouted over the loud alarms. "Hull breach on Deck 3. We're losing oxygen in some sections. The ship can't take much more of this." Hannah's mind raced. The Resolute was their last hope. If it fell, the entire fleet would be destroyed, and humanity's future would be in jeopardy. The Seraph would conquer them. She couldn't let that happen. "Athena, what's our status?" she asked, trying to stay calm. "A full damage report will take time, Commander," Athena replied. "But our shields are holding at 45% power. The enemy is focused on the Resolute, but the other ships are holding their own. However, their energy is depleting faster than anticipated." Hannah clenched her fists. Time was running out. The Seraph had been relentless, pushing the fleet to its limits. She needed a way to turn the tide. She turned to the control panel, looking for any advantage they might still have. "We can't keep trading shots like this," Hannah muttered to herself. "We need something to end this." Suddenly, Athena's voice came through again, calm and methodical. "Commander, I have an idea. There is a way to increase our firepower by rerouting all available energy from non-essential systems. It will overload the weapons, but it could deliver a devastating strike to the enemy fleet. However, this will cause critical damage to the Resolute. There's a high chance the ship will not survive." Hannah looked out at the Seraph ships, their dark silhouettes moving relentlessly toward them. She didn't hesitate. She knew the risk, but they had no other choice. "Do it. Prepare the ship for the final push. Acknowledged, Athena replied. The crew moved quickly, rerouting energy from life support systems and auxiliary functions. The entire ship groaned as the power surged toward the weapons. The Resolute's shields flickered, almost failing, but they held long enough to give them the edge. "Ready, Commander," an officer called out. "Weapons are at maximum power. We can strike now." Hana nodded. "Target their largest warship. Focus all firepower on it. Let's end this." The Resolute's cannons flared to life, sending massive bursts of energy toward the Seraph flagship. The shots hit with devastating force, ripping through the ship's shields and tearing into its core. The Seraph warship staggered, smoke and debris exploding from its hull. It was still alive, but barely. "Fire again," Hana shouted. Another barrage of fire hit the warship, and this time, the Seraph flagship exploded in a brilliant burst of light. The shockwave rocked the Resolute, and the crew felt the tremor as if it were in their bones. The enemy's flagship was gone, but the battle was far from over. The remaining Seraph ships were still coming, and they were angry. "Commander," Athena said, "the energy levels are at critical. The ship will not be able to fire again unless we cease all operations and restore power to essential systems." Hana's eyes widened as she realized the cost of their attack. The Resolute had given everything it had. They were out of options. But then, something unexpected happened. A signal came through from the other ships in the fleet. "Commander, we're picking up signals from the other ships," the communications officer reported. "They've just made a coordinated strike on the Seraph's remaining forces. We've taken down several enemy ships. The Seraph fleet is retreating." Hana's heart skipped a beat. Despite the odds, despite the damage, the fleet had pulled through. The combined firepower of the remaining ships had overwhelmed the Seraph, forcing them to retreat. "Athena, what's the status of the fleet?" Hana asked. "All ships are intact, though heavily damaged," Athena replied. "We have won, Commander. The Seraph are retreating. Humanity's legacy has endured." Hana exhaled deeply, feeling the weight of the battle lift from her shoulders. The fleet had survived. The Resolute had held strong. Humanity was not defeated. "Tell the crew to stand down," Hana said, her voice soft with relief. "We did it. We've won." As the crew cheered and the ship's systems began to stabilize, Hana stood on the bridge, staring out into the vastness of space. The battle was over, but the war was not. The Seraph would return, but they had learned a valuable lesson today. Humanity was not to be underestimated. And when they came back, they would face a fleet that was stronger, more united, and more determined than ever before.